The elevator doors slid shut with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, the lights flickered once, then steadied. Jacob Miller stood in the corner, janitor's cart beside him, mop water gently swaying with the movement. Across from him, a man in a tailored suit stared at his phone, unaware of anything except the message glowing on the screen. The building was quiet. Too quiet. As the elevator rose, Jacob's eyes lifted, not to the floor numbers, but to the reflection in the still wall. His jaw tightened. His hand moved slowly, deliberately. When the elevator jolted, Jacob stepped forward. Before we go any further, let me ask you something quietly. Where are you watching from right now? It's strange how a single moment can travel across cities and screens. Drop your place below. It helps the story feel a little less alone. Jacob had cleaned this building for 11 years. Same floors, same corners, same silence after hours. He knew the sounds most people ignored, the way vents breathed, how old cables hummed, how elevators weren't supposed to shudder like that. The man in the suit finally looked up. Early 40s, sharp haircut, calm face trained by years of control. Everything okay? The man asked. Jacob didn't answer. The elevator slowed, stopped, then dropped half an inch. Not enough to scream, enough to feel it in your bones. Jacob moved fast. He stepped close, placed one hand over the man's mouth, firm but careful, and leaned in until his lips brushed the man's ear. Don't take another step, Jacob whispered. And don't scream. The man froze, eyes wide, breath trapped behind Jacob's palm. Jacob listened, counted, waited. 5 seconds later, a loud clank echoed from below. The cable locked. Emergency lights flickered. Jacob slowly removed his hand. My name is Jacob, he said quietly. I cleaned this building, and I just saved your life. The man stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. Security arrived minutes later. Fire crew, questions, radios buzzing. The man in the suit was escorted out first. Sir, are you all right? Someone asked him. He nodded, but his eyes never left Jacob. Later, as Jacob ran out his mop in the janitor's closet, a voice filled the doorway. Why did you know? The man asked. About the step. Jacob shrugged. You hear things when you're invisible. The man extended his hand. I'm Daniel Ross, CEO of Ross Dynamics. Jacob wiped his hand on his pants before shaking it. Nice to meet you. Daniel hesitated. You have any idea what would have happened if I stepped forward? Jacob nodded once. I do, because he'd learned the hard way. Jacob was a single father. His wife died 8 years ago in a workplace accident, one that also started with a sound no one took seriously. Since then, Jacob listened, always. At home, his daughter Emma waited up for him every night, pretending not to be sleepy. She liked hearing about his day, even the boring parts. That night, he told her about the elevator. She hugged him tight. You're brave. Jacob smiled. I was scared. She shrugged. Same thing. The next morning, Jacob returned to work like nothing changed. Same mop, same hallways, but everything had changed because Daniel Ross didn't forget the whisper, and the man everyone overlooked had just stepped into a story far bigger than a broken elevator. The next few days moved like they always did. People rushed. Elevators dinged, coffee spilled, meetings started late and ended later. But Jacob felt it in the air, a thin new layer of attention. Like dust that wouldn't settle, he tried to stay small anyway. He kept his head down, pushed his cart through the glass hallways, nodded politely when someone looked his way. Most still didn't, most never had, but the building security team did. They stopped him twice that week, not to accuse him, to ask him quietly, to explain what he heard. Jacob told them the truth, the tremor, the clank, the instinct. He didn't mention his wife, Not yet. That part lived too deep to hand out in a hallway. On Friday night, the building emptied early. A storm rolled in, tapping on windows like impatient fingers. Jacob was wiping down the executive floor when he heard footsteps behind him, clean, unhurried steps. The kind that didn't belong to cleaners. He turned out Daniel Ross stood there in a charcoal coat. No entourage, no assistant clutching an iPad. Just him, the CEO who moved like he owned not only the building, but the oxygen in it. You're still here, Daniel said. Jacob raised an eyebrow. So are you. Daniel's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Fair. For a moment, neither spoke. The hallway lights were dimmed after hours, and Daniel looked different in that softer glow, less polished, more human. Like the man inside the suit had stepped forward a little. I asked around about you, Daniel said. Jacob kept wiping the glass. That's a weird hobby. Daniel exhaled. People said you've been here a long time, that you never miss work, that you don't complain. Jacob shrugged, as if it didn't cost him anything to be reliable. Complaining doesn't pay. Daniel watched him for a beat. Then he did something Jacob didn't expect. He took out his wallet and slid a card across the marble counter. My personal number, Daniel said. If you ever hear something like that again, you call me directly. Jacob stared at the card like it might bite. You think I'm your early warning system now? Jacob asked. No, Daniel said quickly. I think you're the only person in this building who is paying attention. Jacob's throat tightened, annoyed at how those words landed. Attention was a strange kind of respect. It could feel like gratitude, or like being used. I did what anyone would, Jacob muttered. Daniel shook his head. That's not true. Most people would have panicked, or frozen. You didn't? Jacob's fingers gripped the cloth harder. Because I've seen what happens when you ignore the wrong sound. Daniel's eyes softened, but he didn't push. Instead, he glanced at Jacob's cart, then at the supplies scattered on the counter. The bucket too heavy for one trip, the trash bag half tied. Let me, Daniel said. Reaching for the bag. Jacob stepped forward instantly. Don't. Daniel froze. Why? Because Jacob swallowed. He hated the way the truth rose up without permission. Because you'll do it wrong and it'll spill. And then I'll be cleaning it twice. Daniel blinked, then laughed. A real laugh. Short, surprised. Okay, he conceded, hands up. Then what can I do? Jacob didn't have an answer. Nobody ever asked him that. People ordered. People walked past. People pretended he wasn't there, but Daniel stood still, waiting. Jacob's side. If you want to help, hold the door. Daniel walked to the double doors and held them open while Jacob pushed the heavy cart through. It was small, almost stupidly small, but it was help, not performative. Not loud, just present. When they reached the service elevator, Daniel pressed the button like he belonged there. The doors opened with a tired groan. You take this elevator? Daniel asked. Every night, Jacob replied. Daniel looked at the narrow metal box, scratched and dull compared to the glossy main elevators. Funny, he murmured. I've never been in it. Jacob didn't say what he was thinking. You've never needed to be. The elevator doors started to close. Daniel hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. Then he asked quietly, What's your daughter's name? Jacob's hand paused on the cart handle. Emma, Daniel nodded slowly. How old? 9. Daniel's gaze dropped. My son is 9. That surprised Jacob more than anything so far. Daniel cleared his throat, suddenly awkward. Tell Emma that her dad is the kind of man people should notice. Jacob's chest tightened. He didn't trust the warmth. Warmth could vanish. Warmth could disappoint, but he forced himself to nod once, because denying kindness didn't make him stronger, It just made him Alo Laney L-I-E-R. Daniel stepped back as the doors slid shut. Jacob watched the CEO's reflection distort in the elevator's scratched metal. A powerful man standing alone in an empty hallway, holding a door for someone the world usually ignored. Back in his apartment, Emma sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, pretending she hadn't waited up. The TV played softly, volume low. Jacob hung his jacket, trying not to limp. His back had started hurting again, an old ache that flared on cold nights. Emma peeked over the blanket. "Did you see the elevator man again?" Jacob smiled faintly. "Yeah." Was he still scared? Jacob sat beside her. "I think he's trying not to be." Emma yawned. "Good, because you saved him." Jacob brushed her hair back. "I didn't save him alone." She frowned. "Who helped?" Jacob thought of Daniel holding the door. Daniel asking about her. Daniel offering a number like a bridge. He helped. In a small way, Jacob said. Emma nodded like that mattered. Like small things were real. And maybe they were. If you were standing there, watching the most powerful man in the building quietly help the janitor push a heavy cart, what would you have felt? Would you trust it, or would you doubt it? Comment your answer below, and if that moment warmed you even a little, hit like to show the world that decency still counts. The following Monday, something changed, not in Jacob, but in the building. People started greeting him, not everyone. Not suddenly, but enough to feel strange. A woman from accounting held the door without being asked. A young intern apologized for stepping over a wet floor sign. Someone left a small box of donuts in the janitor's break room with a note for the night crew. Jacob stared at it for a long time, suspicious of joy. Then the real shift came. A new memo appeared on every floor. Mandatory safety inspection, all elevators. Signed by Daniel Ross. Jacob felt it in his gut. That memo wasn't just policy. It was a response, a whisper answered by action. And as Jacob stood by the elevator bank that evening, watching technicians pry open panels and check cables, he realized something unsettling. Daniel Ross wasn't done with him. Not even close, because when a powerful man owes you his life, he rarely repays it in the way you expect. And Jacob was about to learn that the hardest part of being seen is what people start asking you to carry once they finally look your way. Being seen felt heavier than being ignored. Jacob noticed it first in the pauses, the half seconds where conversation stopped when he walked by. Not out of disrespect, out of curiosity. As if people were trying to place him in a new category and didn't know where he fit. He hated that feeling. He preferred corners, predictable routes, quiet work. Now, eyes followed him. Questions hovered but rarely landed, until one finally did. It came from Daniel, the CEO. Called him into his office late one evening. No assistants, no glass wall audience, just the hum of the city outside and a desk too large for one man. Jacob stood near the door, cap in his hands. "You can sit," Daniel said. "I'm fine," Jacob replied. Daniel studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." He leaned back, exhaling. "I didn't call you here to thank you again. I already did that, badly." Jacob said nothing. "I called you because I need to understand something," Daniel continued. "You knew what that sound meant. You reacted without thinking. That doesn't come from training. That comes from experience." Jacob's jaw tightened, Daniel noticed. "You don't have to tell me." Jacob looked at the floor. Then slowly, he lifted his eyes. "My wife worked in a factory," he said quietly. 8 years ago, she heard a machine sound wrong, reported it. They told her to keep working. Daniel didn't interrupt. The machine jammed. Jacob went on. Safety guard failed. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. The office felt smaller. I learned then, Jacob said, voice steady but hollow, that silence is dangerous. And sounds don't lie. Daniel swallowed. I'm sorry. Jacob shrugged. People always are. No, Daniel said softly. I'm sorry because I built companies like that. Places where warnings get buried. That landed. Daniel leaned forward. I don't want that anymore. Jacob finally looked at him fully. Then listen to the people who clean your floors. Fix your elevators. Carry your trash. They hear things before anyone else. Daniel nodded once deeply. I intend to. That night, Jacob walked home slower than usual. The air felt thick with memory. He hadn't spoken about his wife in years, not because it didn't hurt, but because it hurt too much. Emma was at the table when he arrived. Homework spread everywhere, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Hey. Superstar, Jacob said gently. She smiled. Dad, did you know machines can tell you when they're sick? Jacob froze. Who told you that? He asked, my science teacher. She said you should listen to them? Jacob sat down heavily. That's true. Emma studied his face. You already knew that, didn't you? Jacob nodded. She reached across the table and took his hand. Mom knew too. Jacob's breath hitched. Yes, he whispered. She did. That night, as Emma slept, Jacob sat alone in the dark, memories pressing in. The hospital room. The phone call. The way the world kept moving while his stopped. He wondered how many people around him carried invisible histories like that, quiet griefs that shaped who they became. Had you ever had someone step in for you when no one else would? If yes, write yes, and if you can, share their name. Sometimes saying it out loud keeps their kindness alive. The building changed again. Suggestion. Boxes appeared for night staff. Safety meetings were scheduled at hours janitors could attend. Paychecks adjusted, not enough to make headlines, but enough to breathe easier. Jacob didn't ask for any of it. He watched it happen with cautious distance, like someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. And one night, while mopping near the executive offices, he heard raised voices. Daniel's office door was cracked open. You can't be serious, a man snapped. You're restructuring based on a janitor's instincts? Jacob stopped moving. Daniel's voice followed, calm, controlled. I'm restructuring based on accountability. This is optics, the man argued. You're letting one incident almost killed me, Daniel cut in. And ignoring 1,000 small warnings killed someone else. Silence. Then the man scoffed. You're getting emotional. Daniel's reply was quiet, firm. I'm getting responsible. Jacob stepped away before he was noticed. His hands trembled slightly. He hadn't meant to become a symbol. He hadn't meant to disrupt anything. He just listened. At home, Emma asked, Dad, are you in trouble? Jacob blinked. Why would you think that? Because people don't like when things change, she said simply. Jacob smiled sadly. You're right. The next morning, a letter slid under his apartment door. Not from the building, from the factory. The one where his wife died. They were finally updating safety protocols. New management. New systems. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Your testimony years ago was not ignored. It just took time to matter. Jacob sat on the floor, letters shaking in his hands. Time to matter. He realized then. His life hadn't split into before, and after his wife's death. It had been echoing forward, and now those echoes were being heard. But echoes have consequences, and as Jacob would soon learn, when truth rises to the surface, it doesn't just heal, it challenges. And not everyone welcomes that. The challenge came disguised as opportunity. Daniel called Jacob into the office again, this time during daylight. The city looked different from the top floor when the sun was out. Less dramatic, more exposed. I want you to sit in on the safety committee, Daniel said, sliding a folder across the desk. Jacob didn't touch it. That's not my job. Daniel nodded. That's why it matters. Jacob exhaled slowly. I clean floors. I don't sit in meetings. You listen, Daniel replied. Better than anyone I know. Jacob finally opened the folder. Charts, incident reports, budgets, words that lived far away from mop buckets and late-night silence. You don't want me, Jacob said quietly. You want what happened to me? Daniel's eyes didn't waver. I want both. Jacob left without answering. That night, he scrubbed harder than usual. Anger disguised as effort. His shoulders burned. His hands cramped. Being invisible had been painful, but being used scared him more. In the break room, the night crew sat quietly, eating from plastic containers. When Jacob walked in, the conversation stalled. Someone finally spoke. You gonna be one of them now? Jacob froze. One of who? Management, another muttered. People who forget where they came from? That hurt more than he expected. I didn't ask for this, Jacob said. And I'm not leaving. Silence. Then Rosa, who'd worked nights longer than anyone, looked up. Then don't forget to talk like us. Jacob nodded. I won't. At home, Emma sensed the shift immediately. You're quieter, she said, lying on the floor with her homework. Jacob sat beside her. Sometimes doing the right thing makes noise inside your head. Emma considered that. Mom used to say that. Jacob smiled faintly. She did. The first safety meeting was uncomfortable. Jacob sat at the end of the table. Suits filled the room. Words like liability and risk mitigation bounced around. Without weight. Then someone mentioned acceptable loss margins. Jacob stood up before he meant to. My wife wasn't a margin, he said. The room went still. Daniel didn't stop. Him. Jacob's hands shook. But his voice didn't. The night staff hears things you don't. We see cracks before reports are written. If you want safety, listen to the people who clean up after failure. No one argued. Some looked away. Afterward, a young analyst approached him quietly. My dad works nights, she said. Thank you. Small, quiet, real. That was when Jacob understood. This wasn't about power. It was about translation. Weeks passed. Changes rolled out slowly. Some resisted. Others adapted. Jacob kept cleaning, kept listening, kept speaking when it mattered. Then came the accident, a scaffolding failure at one of the company's older sites. No deaths, but 2 workers injured. The report showed multiple warnings logged. And ignored. Daniel shut the site down immediately. The backlash was fierce. Shareholders panicked. Executives pushed back. Headlines questioned Daniel's leadership. Jacob watched it unfold from the sidelines, guilt creeping in. Had this been his fault? Had speaking up cost people their jobs? Daniel called him that night. They're telling me to walk it back, Daniel said. Jacob swallowed. You don't have to listen to me. I know, Daniel replied. But I won't stop now. Jacob stared at the wall. People are angry. They're scared, Daniel corrected. Change always scares people who benefit from silence. Jacob thought of his wife, of the machine, of the sound no one wanted to hear. The next day, Daniel did something unexpected. He invited the night staff, janitors, guards, maintenance to the town hall. Front rows. Executives sat behind them. Jacob stood beside Daniel at the podium. These people, Daniel said, gesturing toward the workers, are not invisible. They are the reason this company keeps running. And from now on, they will be heard first. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then stronger. Jacob looked out at familiar faces. Rosa, the guards, the cleaners who carried the building on their backs. Every night, he felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Pride. Now, it's your turn. Think of one small good thing you've done recently, even if no one noticed. Share it below so others remember that quiet kindness still exists. Your moment might give someone else the courage they need today. After the meeting, Rosa hugged him, brief but firm. You didn't forget, she said. Jacob smiled. I promised. That night, as he walked home, rain began to fall, light, steady, familiar. He stopped under a streetlight, listening. No danger. No warning, just the sound of water hitting pavement. For the first time, it didn't tighten his chest. It reminded him he was still here, still listening, still choosing. But storms don't end stories, they test them. And as Jacob would soon discover, the greatest test wasn't about safety or systems. It was about loyalty. And whether saving a life once means you're ready to risk everything to save the truth. The loyalty test came faster than Jacob expected. It arrived in the form of a meeting he wasn't invited to, but heard about anyway. 2 executives resigned quietly, no statements, no press, just empty offices by Monday morning. Rumors moved faster than facts, and by Tuesday, the building felt tense, like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. Jacob felt it most at night. Doors closed a little faster. Conversations ended when he passed. Not hostile, careful, as if people were afraid that standing too close to him might put them in the line of fire. He didn't blame them. Change always looks like danger from the outside. Daniel called him late one evening. I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else. Daniel said. Jacob leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Emma draw at the table. Okay, the board is divided, Daniel continued. Some think this whole shift started with you, that you're influencing me. Jacob closed his eyes briefly. Then maybe I should step back. Silence. That's exactly what they're hoping you'll say, Daniel replied. Jacob lowered his voice. I never wanted power. I know, Daniel said. That's why they're afraid of you. That scared Jacob more than anything else. So far. At work the next night, Rosa pulled him aside. People are talking, she warned. They think you're protected, untouchable. Jacob shook his head. I'm just cleaning floors. Rosa studied him. Then keep your feet on them. That night, Jacob found something slipped into his locker, a folded piece of paper. No name. If you keep pushing, people will lose their jobs. Decide what kind of hero you want to be. His hands trembled. Hero. He hated that word. Heroes were people who survived the story. His wife hadn't. Plenty of good people hadn't. At home, Jacob sat alone long after Emma went to bed, staring at the paper. Guilt crept in, quiet and persuasive. What if he was wrong? What if safety came at too high a cost? What if speaking up hurt the very people he wanted to protect? He thought of the factory letter, of the delayed changes, of how long it took for truth to matter, and how many people paid the price while waiting. The next morning, Jacob did something he hadn't planned. He went back to the factory. It had been renovated. New guards, new signage, new machines humming with a different rhythm, smoother, safer. A supervisor recognized him. You're Jacob, right? The man asked. Your testimony changed things here. Jacob looked around. Workers laughed during break. Someone waved. No one lost their job, the supervisor added quietly. We hired more. Jacob's chest tightened. Back at the office building, the board meeting spilled into the hallway, raised voices, sharp tones. We're bleeding credibility, one man snapped. Daniel's reply was calm but firm. We're building integrity. Jacob walked past them, mop in hand, unnoticed, just another janitor, but he heard everything. That night, Daniel stood firm. The board backed down, not because they agreed, but because public pressure was shifting. Workers spoke. Reports leaked. Families shared stories. Truth was louder than fear. Days later, Daniel found Jacob in the service hallway. "It's over," Daniel said quietly. "They're backing the changes." Jacob leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "Good," Daniel hesitated. "There's something else." Jacob looked up. "They want to promote you," Daniel said. "Official role. Safety liaison, office, salary." Jacob laughed once, short, disbelieving. No, Daniel didn't push. "Think about it." That night, Jacob told Emma. She listened carefully, swinging her legs from the couch. "Would you still clean?" She asked. "Yes." "Then why not?" She said simply. Jacob smiled sadly. "Because I don't want to forget where I hear things best." Emma thought for a moment. "You won't. You remember Mom." That did it. Jacob accepted, on one condition. He kept his night shift once a week. The building changed again. Not overnight. Not perfectly, but meaningfully. One evening, as Jacob walked through the lobby in his uniform, someone he didn't recognize stopped him. "You're the janitor who stopped the CEO, right?" The man asked. Jacob nodded. The man's eyes shone. "My brother died in an elevator accident." "Thank you for listening." Jacob stood there, unable to speak. If that moment pressed on your chest the way it pressed on his, leave a. Some gratitude doesn't need explanation, it just needs to be felt. That night, Jacob stood in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep. He realized then that loyalty wasn't about choosing sides. It was about choosing values, even when they cost you comfort, and the cost wasn't finished yet, because forgiveness, real forgiveness, was waiting. Not for systems. Not for boards, but for one man Jacob had never forgiven himself. Forgiving himself turned out to be harder than confronting any boardroom or broken system. Jacob carried it quietly, the thought that if he'd pushed harder, spoken louder, refused to leave that factory floor years ago, his wife might still be alive. That guilt didn't fade with promotions or praise. It followed him into meetings, into quiet nights, into the space beside him in bed where no one slept anymore. The new role came with an office, small, practical, with a window that overlooked the service alley instead of the skyline. Jacob liked that. It kept him grounded, reminded him where the real work happened. But some nights, he still put on the old uniform and worked the floors, listened, watched. The building spoke differently after midnight. One evening, he heard raised voices near the freight elevators. A maintenance contractor argued with a supervisor. Deadlines, budget cuts, shortcuts. Jacob stepped closer. "This part can wait," the supervisor insisted. "We'll flag it later." Jacob felt the old tightening in his chest. "No," he said calmly, stepping into view. "You won't." The men turned, startled. "You don't get to decide that," the supervisor snapped. "This isn't your..." "It is," Jacob replied. "And if it waits, someone could get hurt." The contractor hesitated, then nodded. "He's right." The supervisor stormed off. Jacob leaned against the wall, heart racing. It wasn't bravery. It was memory. At home, Emma noticed his silence over dinner. "You're thinking too loud," she said. Jacob smiled faintly. "How can you tell?" "You stopped chewing." He laughed, a real laugh, surprising both of them. Later that night, after Emma slept, Jacob sat on the couch holding the old factory letter again. The one that said your testimony was not ignored. It just took time to matter. Time. He blamed himself for years for not saving his wife. But what if the truth was simpler and harder? What if he had done everything he could with the knowledge he had then? The question followed him to work the next day, where Daniel waited outside his office. "You okay?" Daniel asked. Jacob hesitated, then nodded. "I think I'm learning how to be." Daniel leaned against the wall. I used to think forgiveness was weakness. Something you did after everything was fixed. Jacob looked at him. And now? Now I think it's how you fix things you can't undo. That night, the building held a remembrance ceremony. Not for headlines. Not for press. Just for workers lost over the years, accidents, illness. Silenced names were read aloud. When Jacob heard his wife's name, the room blurred. He stood frozen until Emma's small hand slid into his dot. She looked up at him. Steady, present, afterward. A woman approached Jacob, older. Lines of grief etched into her face. My husband died here, she said. Years ago. I hated this place. Jacob nodded. I did too. She touched the memorial plaque gently. Tonight, I don't. They stood together in quiet understanding. Later, alone, Jacob returned to the service elevator, the same one where it all began. The metal gleamed now. New cables. New systems. But the space felt familiar. He stepped inside as the doors closed. Jacob closed his eyes. He remembered the sound. The whisper. The hand over a stranger's mouth. And he remembered the other sound years ago. The machine in the factory. The one here too late. His chest tightened. Be honest, Jacob murmured to himself. Could you forgive after what they did? After what you didn't do? Be honest, could you forgive after something like that? Type forgive if you think you could. Or never if it would break you too deeply. There's no judgment here, only truth. The elevator reached the ground floor with a soft chime. Jacob stepped out, lighter than he expected, not healed but moving at home. He tucked Emma in and lingered longer than usual. Dad, she whispered. Half asleep. Mom wouldn't want you to be mad at you. He swallowed hard. I know. She smiled faintly. She said you listen better than anyone. That night, Jacob sat by the window, city lights flickering like distant stars. He thought of all the warnings he'd heard, and all the ones he'd missed. He couldn't change the past, but he could choose how it lived inside him. And for the first time, Jacob let himself imagine a future not built on guilt, but on grace, because the final act wasn't about safety or power or recognition. It was about choosing hope. Even when pain had every reason to stay. And that choice was about to be tested in a way Jacob never expected. The test arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. No alarms. No headlines. Just a call that came while Jacob was helping Emma zip her jacket for school. Dad, she said, struggling with the zipper. It's stuck again. Jacob knelt, guiding the metal teeth gently. Slow, he whispered. If you rush it, it breaks. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Jacob Miller? A voice asked, professional, controlled. Yes. This is the city review board. We need you downtown today. The line went dead. Jacob sat still for a moment, the echo of the call louder than it should have been. Emma looked up at him. You okay? Yeah, he said, forcing a smile. Just work stuff. But his chest felt tight. At the hearing, the room was cold and too bright. Long table, paper stacks, people who hadn't worked a night, shift in their lives deciding what counted as necessary. They spoke carefully, politely. Budget, reallocations, oversight, concerns. About overcorrection, you've caused significant operational delays, one man said. Increased costs. Jacob nodded. Yes, another leaned forward. Do you believe one life is worth shutting down an entire site? Jacob didn't hesitate. Yes, murmurs rippled. You're not an engineer, the man pressed. You're not an executive. No, Jacob replied. I'm someone who has buried a wife because people ignored warnings. Silence. Daniel sat behind him, not speaking, just present. That mattered. After 2 hours, the board recessed. Jacob stepped into the hallway, hands trembling. He felt suddenly very tired. He felt of quitting, of stepping back, of choosing quiet over conflict. Daniel joined him. "Whatever happens," he said, "you change this place." Jacob shook his head. "That's not enough if it doesn't last." When the board returned, their decision was brief. Independent oversight approved. Safety protocols locked in. Jacob's role formalized, protected, not because of sympathy, because the data supported him. Jacob exhaled, knees weak. Outside, the city felt brighter than it had any right to be. He walked instead of driving, letting the noise wash over him. Sirens, laughter, footsteps. Life. That evening, Jacob picked Emma up from school early. Surprise? She guessed. Celebration, he corrected. They got ice cream, the cheap kind, dripping too fast. Emma laughed when it ran down her wrist. "You look lighter," she said. Jacob smiled. "I feel hopeful." She nodded seriously. "Hope is good." Later that night, Jacob returned to the building, not to work, but to watch. He stood in the lobby as the night crew arrived. Rosa waved. Guards nodded. New faces joined old ones. Systems hummed. Elevators moved smoothly. It wasn't perfect, but it was safer. Daniel joined him quietly. "You did it?" Jacob shook his head. "We did." Daniel smiled. "You know, people still talk about that whisper." Jacob glanced at the elevator doors. It wasn't the whisper. It was listening. At home, Emma fell asleep mid-sentence, ice cream forgotten, homework untouched. Jacob carried her to bed, tucking her in with care. He stood there longer than usual, watching her breathe. If you believe hope can still win, even after loss, even after fear, write amen in the comments. Let the space fill with quiet hope, because someone scrolling right now might need to see it. Jacob stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched out before him, alive and imperfect. Somewhere, someone heard a warning and spoke up. Somewhere, someone didn't. He couldn't control that, but he could keep listening. The wind carried the distant sound of machinery, traffic, life in motion. This time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise that doing the right thing, slowly, stubbornly, mattered. And as Jacob stood there, the night wrapping around him like an old coat, he knew the story wasn't ending in triumph or applause. It was ending in something better. Meaning. Still. One final choice remained, not about systems, not about safety, but about what to do with the man he used to be, the one under the weight of guilt and silence. The ending wasn't loud. It was gentle. And it was waiting. Jacob visited the factory one last time on a quiet Sunday morning, not because anyone asked him to, not because there was a meeting or a report or a ceremony. He went because some places hold pieces of us until we're ready to take them back. The building stood quieter now, safer, clean lines where chaos once lived. New machines hummed with a softer rhythm, the kind that didn't demand fear. Sunlight filtered through high windows, dust floating lazily in the air. Jacob walked the floor slowly. He stopped where it had happened. No mark on the ground. No sign to warn future visitors of what was lost here. Just concrete and memory. For years, he'd stood in this exact spot in his mind, replaying every second. What he could have said louder. What he should have done sooner. How love had turned into guilt overnight. He closed his eyes. "I did listen," he whispered, not to the room, but to the man he used to be. "I just didn't know yet how much it mattered." When he opened them again, the weight felt lighter, not gone, but no longer crushing. That afternoon, Jacob took Emma to the park, the one with the old metal swings that creaked when you pushed too high. The one his wife used to love. Emma ran ahead, laughing, hair flying behind her. "Dad, push me." Jacob smiled and did once, twice, higher. She squealed with joy. For a moment, the past and present overlapped. Pain and peace coexisted without fighting. Jacob felt it then, not closure, but something better. Acceptance. On the walk home, Emma held his hand tightly. "Dad," she asked. "Yeah. Do you think Mom is proud of you?" Jacob didn't rush the answer. "Yes," he said softly. "But I think she was proud even before all this." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I am." That night, Jacob stood once more in the building lobby, the same place where everything had changed. The elevators opened and closed smoothly now. People stepped inside without fear, without knowing, and that was okay. Daniel passed by, nodded quietly, and kept walking. No speeches, no lingering, just mutual understanding. Jacob took the service elevator up alone. As it rose, he rested his hand against the cool metal wall. He remembered the whisper, calm, urgent, human. "Don't take another step." He realized something then. That whisper wasn't just for the CEO. It had been for him too. A warning not to keep walking into silence. Not to ignore the sounds that mattered. Not to let pain turn him quiet. At home, Jacob checked on Emma one last time before bed. She slept sprawled across the mattress, peaceful, safe. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway. If this story reached something tender in you, don't scroll past in silence. Tap like, not for a video, not for a channel, but for the man who carried loss, stayed kind, and chose to listen anyway. One small click can be your way of saying, "I felt this." And it mattered. Jacob stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was just a man who learned that ordinary jobs can hold extraordinary purpose, and that sometimes the smallest actions echo the longest. The world would keep rushing. Machines would keep humming. People would still miss warnings. But somewhere tonight, someone would pause. Someone would listen. Someone would choose to speak. And maybe because of one janitor, one whisper, one choice, another life would keep going. Jacob turned out the final light. The apartment settled into quiet. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned.